All right, Kristen, you said hey, I say hi. If you can hear me, hit the like button. Amanda's on, Katie's on as well. Like Christine was on briefly, and she left. She was not happy with me. That's interesting. All right, there's a wave. Good, good, good. All right. So you should see a picture of the rock with a bunch of pancakes. I think that's brownies in the middle and pizza on the right. So we'll get started here in about a minute or two. I just want to give people a chance to jump on. I know this conflicts with bedtime for some, and it's not a perfect time, but we make the most of it. I will put a replay into the group, but it should take no more than 10-15 minutes. I've only prepared maybe a dozen slides, so we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it right away. All right. Again, if you have questions throughout, hit that comment box below and send them away at all times. I'll be watching it. Okay. Let me just make sure people can see. Okay. One more second here. Promise to invite this person. All right, we'll get moving then right now. So, without further ado, put those phones away unless you're watching this on a phone, because these things are horrible for notifications. You get distracted, you jump onto some website, and you leave poor old Mitch behind. And then you ask me questions about this later when you could have seen and heard the answer in real time, okay? So just focus. 15 minutes, promise good things. So, get this out of the way first off. In the infamous words of Michael Scott, no, God, no, please, no, do not do this. A once weekly cheat day with no rules, reckless abandon. You get up, you have brunch, you go for lunch at some restaurant, order pizza, and you know you're just sick by the end of the day, right? That is a recipe for disaster, despite how good your 6 days prior went. Same goes for free weekends where you think, oh, you know what, I'm ate perfect Monday to Friday. Saturday and Sunday, I'm not going to track my food. I'm not going to exercise. I'm just going to eat what I want when I want. And again, that's that whole cycle that results in very little to no progress. Case in point, let's say 2,000 calories is your number to lose about roughly a pound or two a week. But then Saturday comes around and you double it to 4,000 calories. Now you're in a surplus for the week. Technically, you may even gain some fraction of weight here. Oh, probably not. You'll probably maintain because the body is pretty adaptive. Jenna, welcome. So what that means is you've washed out 6 pretty boring clean days by this one big cheat day, when instead, if you would just kind of been moderate in your approach, you would have been just fine and lost weight. So you can, and I don't recommend this, but you could crash diet technically for 2-3 days, then have a day like this and maybe still lose a pound. But I don't love that approach. I like to bump up carbs a little bit. Sure, have a day where you eat more carbs, days when you eat less, but not to these extremes of either swing of the pendulum, right? And we'll get into that. And your plans are built to avoid these kind of scenarios. But just so you know, to reiterate, cheat days do not work. However, let's move on. So people kind of out there in the interwebs will say, oh, this cheat day spikes my metabolism. It's revved up for the next 2 days, and I lose a ton of weight afterwards because of how it revs up my metabolism. But in fact, the studies show that does not actually result. Yes, there is some thermic effect from eating more food. You have more calories burned just to digest it, but it's maybe 400 calories at the top end the next day. You're still in a net negative here, in other words. So don't use it as an excuse to bump up your metabolism. How you do that is eating in maintenance for a full week or two at least. And I spoke about that a few weeks back with those diet breaks, when and why to do them. I would suggest most of you are not at a place to take a diet break right now, but there will come a time when you have to, and that's perfectly acceptable. And as part of the process, one step back for two steps forward. All right, so the other argument is it improves your leptin levels, and that's the hormone that regulates appetite. And when you diet, when you're in a calorie deficit, leptin levels slowly but surely decrease, eventually tank. So the theory goes that a cheat day vastly increases your leptin levels. The truth is, it is very short-lived, not enough to make a measurable difference. Again, the only way to raise leptin is to go into maintenance where you're not losing weight. You're going to have to deal with lower leptin levels. In other words, you're going to be hungry at times. And that's just sort of the nature of the beast because your body is programmed to maintain where it's at. Any threat to its maintenance right now is perceived as a dire situation when in fact, that's no longer the case in our society. But we're hardwired for a different time. So we have to do the best with what we got. Yeah, this is just a graph, a fancy graph that illustrates when you increase calories, it spikes briefly. So you're full for the next day, maybe. Then it drops back to baseline, especially if you try to overcompensate on the back end and eat really little. Then those levels will come right back down. So in other words, don't bother for this reason. All right, so this should be fun because I like to call it a refeed. And if you're really struggling, bored of the same old foods, there's a few ways to go about it. And reframing the wording is a big part of that. Anytime you call it a cheat, you're defining foods as good or bad, and creating a bad relationship with food. I'm guilty of doing that as well. So the right reasons to improve adherence the rest of the time. If you know you've got one meal to look forward to on Saturday, you're gonna be better on plan the rest of the time. And there's a little mental break that comes with that, right? Because this is not easy. Truthfully, to create enough of a deficit to lose weight consistently and keep it off, that's a lot of work. You guys know that. You're in the midst of it. So giving yourself a little mental break, a little celebration for reaching a weight loss milestone of some kind, those are encouraged. Celebrate your wins, right? So the right way to refeed is not what The Rock does. He's got a lot higher BMR than any of us. And this is mostly for show. I'm sure he eats mostly fish and rice. Once in a while, he goes nuts. So you carb up a bit. So there's a reason I would suggest and encourage you to have fun foods that are high in carbs, but predominantly low in fat. Okay? And I'll get into that in a second. But all you're doing here is increasing calories to maintenance. So you're still tracking, you're not having an all-out binge, but that's roughly multiplying your body weight by 14. Okay? So I can't do any math off the top of my head. But typically body weight times 8 to 10 is where we're dieting. So it's quite a bit more food once a week. And this is only for those who are seeing consistent results to this point. And I'll give you a plan B in a second here. But everything else stays the same. And let's go to the next slide because that explains it better. So it's a lot harder for carbs to be stored as fat than fat. I know this is sort of goes against the popular dogma of low carb diets, keto. They're all the rage right now. But frankly, carbs are going to be a better friend to you than fats. It's the combination of the two that typically get people in trouble, right? You think your donuts, you think your pizza, these high fat and high carb foods are just really high calorie. That's what gets people in trouble. So carbs actually have an effect on water retention in a good way. So when you've been dieting for a long time, your cortisol levels are increased, your body's trying to hold on to more water, that can mask fat loss. You could be losing weight, or fat, sorry, but your weight is not showing much of a decrease, and sometimes it's because of this. So bumping up your carbs for a day can actually have a kind of a whoosh effect, and you look leaner the next day, and that's just that water loss that was created. I know that sounds a little weird too, but trust me on this one. All right, so you keep the foods high in carbs, low in fat. You think cereals, pancakes, ice cream, and fruit. And again, there's a fine line to walk here. If you're the type that's not going to stop at one bowl, then there's probably better options. And the structured flexibility I talk about next is probably better suited to you. The leaner you are, the more likely you can go with this option. So down the road, it certainly is a viable thing. For a lot of you that are still in that growth phase, trying to do everything you can to lose that initial 20, 30, 40 pounds, this is probably not the best idea. But in a pinch, if you know you're going to cheat, think high carb, low fat. All right. Yeah, like I said just now, I kind of repeated myself before realizing this for the slide that spoke about this, is a moderate approach is typically better. And that's where you have high and low days matching your activity levels. Because if you kind of have binge eating tendencies, having a carb up day, even if you call it a refeed, could get you into big trouble if you know you just can't stop once you get that sweet. I'm that way too, so I really have to moderate. Cereal and fruit aren't bad, as long as you're accounting for them in your calories, right? But some foods are very easy to overeat. I like the fibrous stuff. You know, some fruits are great. Starchy foods, it's hard to overeat like a cup of brown rice and do more, okay? That's the reasoning for that. All right, so option 2, which I recommend you start right now, is structured flexibility, where a little bit of popcorn, a little bit of ice cream can fit nearly every day so that you always have something to look forward to. You're not restricting day after day after day. You have to plan for this, of course, but let's say your calorie target is 2,500. After dinner, you're at 2,200. What does that leave you? 300 calories to, scratch that itch. Eat that little bit of ice cream that you were having craving for days, maybe a glass of wine, anything that's less than 300 calories, to give yourself that little reward at the end of the day. All right? As long as you're still counting it, adhering to some portions, this can work. So what that looks like, some people like to fast first thing. I like that approach because it makes your meals later in the day bigger and more satisfying. But if you're a breakfast person, I'm not going to tell you not to. But here is an example way to look at this. So you fast until 11, maybe noon, have a salad with chicken for lunch, so you're pretty much no carbs at this point. Protein snack could be a bar, a shake, something that's predominantly protein, not much else. And then you follow up with a big dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. And after that, you realize, oh, I've got roughly 300 calories here. I'm going to have some frozen yogurt. It's a low-fat, high-carb option. And then again, if your protein is low, you can have a snack after that. That's predominantly protein again. So that's really how this looks. So if you've got 300 calories to work with, mostly from carbs, there's no reason you have to have something boring for those carbs. You know what I mean? So in that case, you kind of satisfy a bit of a craving and you adhere to the plan still. So, looking at your food logs, most of you understand this. You're trying to be too strict. It's going to bite you in the butt eventually. No one eats chicken and brown rice day after day ad nauseum. So, the wine can get you in trouble if it leads to more than one glass, right? Or it affects your sleep. But you just want to wind down and you can fit the calories in, be my guest, right? Try to keep it at least 2 hours away from your bedtime because it can affect the quality of your sleep. But hate to be a Debbie Downer on that one, all right? So again, last but not least, if you still have cravings, you're out of calories for the day, exercise, right? Get those endorphin rushes rushing another way. Even just a quick walk, the 30-day challenge I'm posting, that's a good option for in this boredom window, right, between 8 and 10 p.m. And this can increase or decrease that boredom, that psychological eating where we tie watching TV with snacking. And you got to work pretty hard to undo those habits. But the more you schedule in this little workout, this little walk at the end of the day, the better you sleep, the better you'll adhere to the plan, okay? So I think that's it for today. You guys have questions? I am opening the floor. Amanda summed it up perfectly. If I have calories left, I can have wine if it stays within the numbers. That is exactly the point of tracking your numbers. Exactly. You've got it. We want to leave no food off limits, but you know there's some foods that just aren't worth the calorie cost, right? Yeah, Jenna has to watch her beer, so that can get her in trouble. I shouldn't open the floodgates to beer and wine drinking. But that was just an example. Just to illustrate my point here is that the more you can say, oh, I've got a little bit of frozen yogurt to look forward to, the less likely you're going to binge at some point down the road. And that is ultimately what I want for you, is the results you came to me for in the first place. All right. So that's all she wrote for tonight. Enjoy your football or bachelor watching, whatever it is you do. Likely neither. And we will talk again very soon. So starting Friday, I believe, is November 1st, after Halloween, dump the candy in the garbage or give it away and start the November workout challenge. I've also loaded new workouts for pretty much everybody in the app as well. So those should be started if you haven't yet already. If you have any issues with those, please send me a message. Sometimes tech can be problematic, but I think we're good. All right. That's it, ladies. You guys are doing great. Keep it up. Stay focused. That's what it's all about.